Politics and investments are much more connected than most people realize. And as we're discussing investor resources, particularly around forecasting the political environment that you're going to be in, every election, every policy change, or every government announcement can dramatically affect the return of an investment. We've seen this tremendously in the space of like Airbnbs recently, where increased regulation in both blue and red districts has really put a hamper on this asset class. Now, it hasn't destroyed it, but it's made some operators no longer successful that were successful 5 years ago. So, what does this really mean for investors like you and for me? First off, political decisions shape the economic environment. And this is true on a federal, a state, and local level. So, at any point, we have to understand that the environment that we're in can shift. One of the prime examples as we're looking at this is COVID-19. Now, luckily, we're past that, but overnight, in a country, the land of the free, the government made it necessary to shut some things down. Tenants were out of work. Some kept work. The government decided who was essential and who wasn't. Some places wouldn't let you out without a mask or required you to carry a card that said you'd gotten your vaccine. And I'm not talking about the politicalness of those events. I'm just saying that is a dramatic and good example of how overnight things can change. Now, what's important is how much we can forecast that. It's why we as an operator operate in southern Ohio, particularly the Cincinnati and Dayton area, because we get this nice little Goldilocks zone of, hey, we're a leading red state. We've got some blue municipalities of Cincinnati and Dayton that have some real upside. But we've got some rural investments in between there that are very red counties that give us the opportunity to operate in red districts. The lucky part for us during our residential period, is during COVID, is our courts didn't stop the eviction process. They allowed them to continue. Right, wrong, or in between, that was the decision of our local governments. And our relationship with those local governments certainly helped those things. Now, the other plus of this is there's a huge surplus of emergency funds available to tenants. And many of them were able to stay in their housing because there was assistance programs in place. Those assistance programs, though passed bipartisanly, are generally a blue or Democratic ticket item. So understanding that politics plays a role, it makes it hard to forecast. Understanding it is an important part of forecasting the success of an investment. When you look at an investment, you're trying to find places where you're getting pro-government support. That's one of the reasons why we love residential housing or multifamily. There's a shortage of housing in this country. The government historically, when there is a need, creates favorable situations for investors, developers, to fill that need. Now, I can't tell you the specifics of what those are. There is certainly many tax benefits that may continue to increase over time, but I can't tell you the specifics. What I can tell you is we're likely going to see favorable tax or legislation for housing on a federal level and particularly a state level in Ohio because of this need. Now, anybody that's ever been involved in any type of project of development or changing a situation will tell you that having a relationship with the local governments is actually probably the most important thing you can do. When we're talking about forecasting, this is how we can sit there and have an accurate and friendly conversation with our investors about, hey, we think this is where it's going. Because we've operated in the same towns for multiple generations. So we know the mayor. We know the city managers. We've worked with the zoning person. They often have my direct cell phone number for our properties. They know that if they get a hold of us, then we'll take care of it. This is how we can control some of the politics of the situation. It's not right or wrong. It's just they know that we're a responsible landlord. And that if there's an issue, we'll certainly get it addressed. That is how we can control some of the forecasting of politics. Now, we've talked about it on the federal level, where there's a need and likely going to see government support. On a state level, we've seen it in Ohio. And we talked about how locally, how we've interacted. Now, I wish I could sit here and tell you and put on my magic cap and give you an 8 ball and tell you 100% this is where housing regulation is going. I can't. Tomorrow they may pass a legislation that requires everything be green housing, which means we've got to put solar on every roof and insulate every single piece of plumbing line in a building, which means tearing out the walls and insulating those particular lines themselves. I have no idea truthfully, where the law or legislation is going to go. But to sit there and blindly invest without taking into consideration the politics and the environment of the investment is foolhardy. So take a look at the trends when you're taking your next investment. Forecast it on where you think it's going to be a favorable environment. Do you think housing is going to get better legislation-wise for landlords in New York City or in Hamilton, Ohio? Do you think legislation is going to be better in Florida for landlords in 5 or 10 years or Chicago? I don't know. That is a decision for you to make, but it's something you should think about when you're making an investment, especially if you're making an investment for a long-term hold. Because if you're in or out in 3 years, it may not affect you. But if you're holding an investment for the long term, these things will definitely have an impact. Thank you.